All right, good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us for another Daily Highlights with myself, Graham Holmes, and Dr. Stephanie Taylor. Today, well, for quite some time, we've been talking about um, humidification and adding humidity into the air and into a space and into a building. And one of the biggest pushbacks we see from this is the talk about mold. Um, just last episode, we actually brought up a dehumidifier that Condair has launched, so a desiccant dehumidifier. And that's definitely one technique to reduce the relative humidity in a space. But as we'll see today and how Dr. Taylor will explain, it may not be a way to manage mold. So Stephanie, with that, I'll turn it over to you and we can start looking through these couple slides.
Great. And good morning, everyone. It's a beautiful day here in Stowe, Vermont. So happy to be here with you. So how many people think when they hear the word humidity that it equates to mold? I used to, before I had a better understanding of the relationship between humidity and mold. But many of us think, you go up in your attic or down to your basement or wherever, and you see mold and you think, my house is too humid, I have to dry it out. And actually this concern is what limits people from putting humidifiers in commercial buildings as well, or limits them from using humidifiers. So let's take a slightly closer look at the relationship between water in the vapor form, which is humidity, and mold growth. So if you go to the next slide, clearly you have a person here shown very faintly with their respiratory tract outlined. And, if you don't want to inhale mold spores, you don't want to inhale the little broken off pieces called hyphae. So the question is, how does humidity relate to both the growth of mold or fungus, same thing, and how does humidity relate to the airflow of the aerosols? So interestingly, when you have dry air, you're going to have increased release of those little spores and hyphae if you already have existing mold. So if you have mold in your house, the last thing you want to do is just simply dry out that area, because then you'll get very symptomatic, respiratory symptoms, skin, itching, irritation. So let's take a look at what it takes to have the mold in the first place. So if we go to the next slide. So think to yourself, if you have mold in your basement or somewhere and you humidify, what happens? And in fact, fungal organisms pretty much exist in wood, and they exist in any soil that might be in your concrete. So mold is around in our environment. So if you humidify the air, can those teeny tiny mold organisms extract humidity out of the air? So most people will say yes, mold can extract water vapor. The fact is, mold or fungi doesn't care about the water vapor in the air. You have to get to about 90% relative humidity before mold becomes hygroscopic or attracts the water vapor out of the air. Interestingly, the US military did studies around World War I when they were trying to store foodstuffs in warehouses, and they were wondering what makes our food moldy, or what makes our chocolate moldy, or our leather. And they found that, in fact, mold cannot extract water vapor out of the air. However, in the next action, mold does care about water activity. So when you reach water activity of about 0.8, that's when you begin to have liquid condensation. The next slide. The next act. So on your surface, if you have a cold surface that interfaces with warm humidified air, you're going to reach water activity of about 0.8. That's known as the dew point. And so once you have liquid water, in the next action, once you have liquid water in your substrate, in your wood, or on your floor or wherever, the mold can use that for growth, but mold cannot extract water vapor from the air unless you get really, really, really high, around 90%. So I think that might be the last. Is there one more, Graham? Nope. So if we just go back to that last slide, it's really important to realize that humidity per se does not lead to mold growth. However, if you have poor insulation, if you have cold outdoor air interfacing with warm humidified air in your wall, you're going to have liquid condensation. If you have a cold pipe and you have warm humidified air around that cold pipe, you're going to have condensation and dripping, and that liquid water will lead to mold. However, the solution is not to dry your air out and create respiratory problems for yourself, have spore and hyphae release into the air. That's not the solution. The solution is, number one, get rid of the mold that you have. Number two, try as hard as you can to insulate your building properly. Make sure that you have good U value so that you don't have those points of condensation occurring. So it's safe to humidify, but you have to insulate properly.
Okay, thanks, Stephanie, for explaining that. And it is really important to both keep the building healthy for occupants and for the processes we do. So insulation is truly the key in there, and not just drying out the air. With that, thanks everyone for joining us today. Today is actually my mom's birthday, so shout out, Mom, happy 58th birthday. And see you guys next time.
See you Friday.